Hi, and welcome to BuildWise, the podcast where construction meets wisdom. Join us as we explore the ins and outs of the construction industry. We're going to share insightful tips. We're going to dive into the latest trends. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started in your journey in construction, BuildWise is your go-to source for valuable insights. Let's build a smarter, wiser future together. Like and subscribe now, and stay tuned for a foundation of knowledge in every episode. Thank you.
Okay, well, first, I would just like to take this opportunity for you to wish me a happy birthday.
That's right. It's your birthday. Happy birthday, Brianna.
Thanks. I was going to bring cupcakes, but I was late.
Yeah.
Okay,
You still should have brought the cupcakes.
Well, then I would have been even more late. So, okay, today we're going to talk about residential construction, and in a separate podcast, we'll talk about commercial construction. There are some differences, and so Dan is going to kind of go over them and discuss them. So, with residential, can you provide examples to our audience about projects that you've personally completed or projects that you might have in the works right now?
Yeah, so let's see. Been doing this for quite a while, 40 some years, and we've done some ultra custom stuff in different states. And then I've got 3 of our own spec homes going right now, and one's like 3,500 square feet, the other one's 4,300 square feet, and then the other one's about 3,500. And so yeah, we're doing, and we got another custom home we're doing, and we've got one for a charity program that we're doing right now, and so so we're doing quite a few.
Yeah. Take me back down memory lane. You did a massive, it wasn't from the ground up, but you worked on a massive home in San Diego that was pretty custom, right? He had the underground cave and
Yeah.
I think it was like 5 levels. I mean, that was quite a trip for us kids.
Yeah, it was a house on Mission Bay, and it was previously owned by a famous baseball player. So famous, I don't remember who it was, but it was just a long time ago.
Yeah.
And
Babe
then,
Ruth?
huh?
Babe Ruth? That long?
No.
I'm kidding.
But I mean, it had a revolving bed. It had an underground grotto. We put a wine cellar in it. When we got there, the house was dated, and we had to bring it up to date. We automated it, and this was back before automation like it is today. This was all state of the art. Like, nobody had this kind of stuff unless you hired specialty people.
Yeah. Now it's probably so common.
Yeah, and so, this thing had blackout shades, it had sunshades, it had a jacuzzi up on the upper deck. We took the whole roof and turned it into an actual deck. It used to be just a roof, and then we turned it into a deck with a glass rail, and it just looked out. It was gorgeous. You had 360-degree views, looked out over everything. And then the grotto was in disrepair, so we had to hire a custom pool guy. And so, like, the grotto had stones, like fake-looking stones and rocks and stuff like that. And,
I remember. It was so cool.
Yeah, and it had this jacuzzi in the center. And it had waterfalls that kind of enveloped the jacuzzi.
Yeah.
So you had to kind of cross through the waterfall to get into the jacuzzi, which was kind of like a waterfall curtain.
Yeah.
And so then, but yeah, it was really neat. And then the stucco had been done by a guy that used to work at Disneyland.
Right. Didn't he build the Tarzan or Pirates of the Caribbean, something?
Something like that, yeah. So I don't remember exactly, but
Yeah.
it was really nicely well done. Well, finding people to do those specialty things without jacking it all up, that was a challenge.
Yeah.
And then we added, fake ivy coming out of some of the places and little plants and some things like that. And yeah. fully automated that house. It was actually on TV on the Manly Man show on PBS.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So yeah, and
that's cool.
Yeah, it was interesting. So done all kinds of interesting houses and custom homes and things like that.
Yeah, from just regular to very extreme and historical. So, okay. So in your opinion, What should the approach to project management on residential jobs be? Is it different from your approach to commercial projects?
Not really. This project management is project management. I mean, it's in the title. I mean, it's you manage the project from beginning to end. You know, you try to find the right subs. I will say it's a little more challenging finding the right subs in residential probably than commercial.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
Because I think just anybody that's entry level into construction starts off in residential, it seems like. And then when they feel like they're ready, they jump into commercial. And so that's why I think the residential industry has been hard to find, really good, talented people that are professional. They're out there. Don't get me wrong. It's just, there's a handful versus, a lot of them.
Yeah, and we'll go over that in another podcast, just talking about subcontractors, how to find the best ones, how to kind of vet them for the right project and whatnot. But so with these kind of projects, what kind of insurance are you required to have and bonds? What's the difference between licensing and, insurance and bonds for these projects?
So typically on houses, it's you get with your registration. So contractors in Idaho have registrations, not typically a license. Like other states require you to have a license, and that was some of the regulation stuff that we have in the other podcast. But so you registered, and then you required. Well, I don't even know that you're required technically, but you need to have a liability policy and for anything that goes wrong. And so, depending on the size projects you're doing, like if you're doing patio covers, you don't need probably as big, but if you're building, whatever $1 million, $2 million, $5 million house, it needs to cover that and some.
Right.
So, if there was a tragedy or something that happened, the whole thing's covered.
Right.
So.
Okay. So if there were a fire and you have the proper insurance, it just takes care of it? How does that process work?
That's in our policy, and I'd have to go dig it and read it. But and then sometimes like there's builder's risk. There's different insurance policies for different things. So like you're required to have a builder's risk, that's exactly what it's kind of for is. You're building this, you've got a bank loan, and then, the place burns down.
Yeah.
And so then it basically covers that whole
loss.
thing, that whole loss. Okay. And and then the banks require that. And each contract and each bank and everything, you got to read that carefully because each one specifies what they need. So like, there's be additional endorsements, there's going to be all that kind of stuff. And so, and they'll have specific verbiage sometimes. And so you got to ask them, what do you want in that additional endorsement? And they'll give you the actual little verbiage in somewhere in the contract, or they'll email it to you or whatever. And then you send that to your insurance agent and they put that in there.
Okay. Well, we know that with residential construction, you have a client who is attached to the home that's being built. So emotions can typically run probably a little bit higher than a commercial project when they're just building like a restaurant. Not that their heart and soul doesn't go into a restaurant as well, but a home is where you reside and live and build memories. So how do you handle client emotions as things, either go wonderful or if there's any kind of hiccup and whatnot?
Probably not as well as I should have.
That's why we're doing spec homes.
It is true why we build spec homes. Client emotions, that's what's really hard about the residential versus commercial is there's a lot of emotions wrapped up into every conversation.
Yeah.
And decision-making powers. Some people are awesome at making decisions, and you just get to do things. They make a decision, move on, run with it. The ones that it's difficult and it gets even more emotional is they pick out something and then you get it in there and then they go, they've looked at it for like 3 days and they're going, I just can't handle it, tear it out, and then you're like, what?
So, and that's that when you have a situation like that, that's a change order is then in place. And what's a change order?
It should be a change order.
Yeah.
Not all the time is. It
Okay.
depends on, if you followed all the protocols. If you follow all the protocols, then yeah, it would be legitimate. Depending on how difficult it is. Sometimes change orders they're not worth the effort, right? It's just easier to solve it. And
Yeah.
just move on and forget about it. But other ones where they keep changing things, it's what they don't understand is there's a whole process in the background that goes on to get all that work done. And just, work meaning like on the phone, ordering, meeting the people, checking it, getting it delivered, receiving it, all those kind of things. It's back of the house kind of stuff that, it's hard to quantify how many hours you spend in it. You try to guesstimate on, how much time you spent on it, but, you spent time on the phone, you've, did all those things, right, to get that stuff to the job site.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they keep changing it, it's like you got to do it all over again. So now you got man hours and time, all back on top of it. So you got to be really careful when you make a decision that you try to stick to it.
Yeah. So when there are unexpected challenges or things that come up, how is it best handled? Is it best handled by just the project manager taking on, or do you go up to the general contractor, the head boss? Does it depend on the size of the problem or the challenge, or?
You talking for a change order?
You tell me. If it's a change order, does that have to go through the general contractor, or does the project manager handle that?
Well, no. So the general contractor hires the project manager, right? So
Yeah.
they're in charge of running that project from beginning to end. So the project manager will handle any necessary paperwork, whether it's a problem that turns into a change order. So how that should work doesn't always work that way. In fact, it needs to happen this way more often. Is you got a set of drawings, says a certain thing, depending on whatever pre-construction stuff you got also, but you got that, you issue, say you had a question, an RFI that comes back that it's different than what the plans say, and it's going to take you more manpower, more time, your subcontractors hitting you up for more money, so then you got to put all that into a change order request. You put it all in there, you discuss it with the client, say, look, because of these changes, we've got this much extra work, this material changed, or whatever it is. And then you put all that together, and then you also, in that change order, should be if there's any scheduling changes. So all part of that change order should take care of, if there was any changes in the RFI, it should capture the costs, and then it should capture the time element.
Okay.
And then it should be presented to the client. It should get signed first, and then that changes your prime contract amount, and then you go back then and issue the change order to your subcontractor or your vendors, and then that changes that amount.
Right.
And then you can move on with that.
Okay. So we got some visitors in our office.
We got construction going on all around
Yeah,
us.
it's a little.
And every once in a while we'll go.
my brain just went poof. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to just bring up is, so we're going to be digging more into the residential side of it, just given the fact that we're in a time where so many people want to build their own home, and it's becoming a huge topic. So we wanted to provide like a step-by-step guide that will be available by ebook once that episode is dropped as well. But it's gonna break down the steps that are involved to building your own home, because there are so many steps that are involved, so that anybody that is interested or looking to go that route has kind of a plan, and can kind of that checklist. There's a lot that goes into it before the building process even begins, so that we'll keep you guys up to date and let you know when that drops, but just a heads up that is in the future. So What are your thoughts as far as the biggest contrast between commercial and residential construction? And then after this, we'll just conclude with some final thoughts.
Well, so residential seems to be, and it depends on the level of the house. So usually, if you get into, ultra custom homes, they're usually ran a little more professional. They have the money to buy, to spend on the architect and engineers and all the people you need as resources. Smaller the house, you're trying to get a draftsman to do stuff that doesn't have necessarily all the knowledge that maybe an architect would, and the preparedness to handle questions quickly and those kind of things. So the residential side is a little more, as a general contractor, you got to really be on top of that part of it and be kind of a little more. There's not, and there should be, but there's not always the most direct route. We have a project right now that the architect just went rogue on us and disappeared, and very hard to get a hold of, if we could get a hold of them at all.
Yeah.
And so you got all these questions, and so once you have an architect of record, to change that with some new architect, it's not usually accepted unless you do a formal change of the architect of record, right, or engineer of record. So you can't just, you can, it's just not as easy, and it's not, you got to kind of go through a little bit of a process to do that properly, because it's his drawings, it's his, kind of mindset on how he planned on doing it. And then you introduce someone new without doing a proper change of record, then it's not good, kind of frowned upon. But we had to kind of take over because we were waiting months for answers. So the residential, that's very difficult. In commercial, it's a little more regime. It's like, this is the process.
Yeah.
And so, you do a pre-construction meeting, you do the, if you got an RFI, you've got, this whole panel of people you can send stuff to. If it becomes a structural issue, the architect shuffles it off to the structural. If that, say it's a light standard out in the parking lot, then, civil might get involved on like elevation. And, you got these people, this whole set of resources that you usually don't have in residential. Mm-hmm. And then commercial, when people kind of understand that when it's not in the plans, it's not in any pre-construction notes, it's not anything that's been submitted, and then there's a change, they know a change order is coming, right?
Right.
For residential, usually the words you get are, you should have known that, you're the contractor. And you're like, yeah, I left my crystal ball at home today, but it's like, it's not, and some of it they're right. Some of it they are right. There are some things that you should catch. But then again, we're not perfect either. And so you're trying to read, all this information. You're trying to understand the intent of what the clients want, trying to look at the drawings and trying to figure stuff out. And you don't always see it until it gets three-dimensional.
Yeah.
And then once it does and you notice it, and then you got to go back and make sure it didn't, match everything else. But you got to do your homework on that too. So I'd have to say that the resident difference is, residential's got some holes in the resources to go, to go to and get answers quick.
Yeah.
Depending on the size of the project and what they spent the money on, which kind of tells me to say to everybody, just, it's definitely worth it to spend the money on a good architect or somebody that that can draft stuff up and will be paid for questions throughout the job. So like in a setting, whether it be residential or commercial, if you hire somebody and in their contract, say your drafting contract, there should be language in there that they will do so many site visits, they will be available for RFIs, and they'll usually say either an amount of RFIs or something. They'll put a limit on it usually, and then they'll have an hourly charge rate. And so if you have a contract like that, that's good, because that means that when the contractor or somebody has a question, that person's available and they will be available to answer that question, and they'll do it timely, and they're going to have their head more in the game, and be available.
Yeah. I have one more quick question because it just made me think of this, and I think that this is actually really important. How important is it to get the contractor in on all of the details from the very beginning?
That's a good question, actually. So, wrong camera. So, anyways, I'm trying to make sure I get them right. It does say Big Bree right here, so I shouldn't have done it.
User error.
I know. Anyways, it is such a, I think, an asset to the project to be able to get the contractor in advance while the plans are being developed. There's so many things and oversight that a contractor can see that, a lot of architects and engineers are looking at things two-dimensional. I mean, it's kind of hard to say that today like I used to be able to say it because we got all those 3D programs and, BIMs and layers and all these different things, but those still don't capture everything. And then sometimes we just have, with experience, we have the ability to look at the drawing and the phasing or whatever they have and be able to give some really good input on the drawings. So it can definitely be a humongous benefit. And we can offer some what they call VE, value engineering. And so when we see something like, hey man, you might want to think about putting, drawing it like this or putting it together like that. I was talking to my framer, and man, if we do it this way, we could probably save ourselves a week, or something. That's just an example, but that's come up before too.
Yeah.
So getting your contractor in as early as possible is such an added value. It actually should be done more often.
Yeah, I feel like it just would avoid a lot of issues or potential issues.
Yeah.
All right. Well, why don't we finish up with just some of your final thoughts on residential construction? Again, I just want to point out that we will be having more in-depth, detailed conversation regarding how to build your own home and the steps that you can take if that's something you're interested in doing.
So with your booklet that you're talking about having us put together, it's an ebook, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to be working on that and trying to put that together.
It is put together.
Oh, is it?
It's done. Yes.
You did?
It's done.
Good girl. So, well, okay, good. But
it's ready when we drop these episodes.
Okay. Well, we're going to have the checklist for you, but it's really important. There's just so many things, and picking the right subcontractors, knowing what to watch for, asking the right questions, pre-thinking, like when you're in the bid process of your plans, it's important to know your finishes. Mm-hmm. Because, your plumber's going to say, well, what kind of finishes are you going to do? I mean, if they're simple, basic, Delta, whatever, he kind of knows how to price it. If they're custom one-off fixtures that he's never seen before, he might charge something different.
Yeah.
And then if he gives you a price and these fixtures show up, and he's like, first thing he's going to say is like, oh boy, I didn't know that we're going to put these in, it's going to be, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching,
yeah.
And so the booklet and following something like that, if you've never built your own house, it's really important to at least get it for toilet reading. I mean,
yeah,
it definitely will help, give some insight.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing all of your knowledge on residential construction. Well, I wouldn't say all because I know that there's so much more.
I was going to say that wasn't very much.
Well, I mean, we only got like 20, 30 minutes.
I know. Well, and also everybody, if you have questions or whatever, please leave it in the comments, because we are literally trying to keep these to 20 minutes and trying to just kind of get it condensed so that we're not boring you to death, in one sitting, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of information and there's a lot of expanse we can do on everything. And so there'll probably be more and more residential ones and stuff like that, but different subjects or diving into an issue or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but anyways, Thanks.
Awesome.
If you haven't liked and subscribed yet, please do so. And then leave any comments and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.